Lake Macquarie resident Sue Bull visited her local member Jeff Hunter today to complain about the standard of care given to her 3-year-old daughter while she was in the John Hunter Hospital last weekend. While Sue Bull had no problems with the medical treatment her daughter received, she was concerned about a lack of nursing staff and basics such as clean linen on Saturday and Sunday.
There was still no towels, so we had to wipe ourselves with nappies.
Jeff Hunter says Sue Bull is just one of a stream of dissatisfied customers.
Well, I believe there must be a shortage of nursing staff. The complaints that are coming into my office are highlighting the fact that they're not getting the service that the patients believe they should be receiving.
Hunter has written to Area Health Boss Dr Tim Smythe demanding an inquiry. He says the region is underfunded by $15 million each year.
$15 million could employ a lot of nurses, and I'd be calling on Tim Smythe and the Hunter Area Health Board to take the government on to fight for that extra funding so that we can have extra staff in our hospitals and give the people of the Hunter the service that they deserve.
David Boyd was just another face in the crowd for Newcastle's game against the Eels on Sunday after his sacking from British club Halifax. But Knights management would love Boyd to get back on the paddock for the side he represented so well during the late 80s and early 90s.
Well, David's a very experienced player in the Winfield Cup competition, and I think he'd be an asset to any club, particularly to ours. Now, that's not to say that our side's not performing. They certainly are, and we have the faith in all of our players that we have at the moment to do the job. But I think that someone like with David's ability, they can just strengthen the club.
The Knights pack has been in devastating form, but the suspension of Tony Butterfield, an injury to Mark Glanville, and the origin duties of Paul Harrigan have left the side in need of Boyd's services. The Knights applied to the New South Wales Rugby League to get the forward, but the club was knocked back, as Boyd was 3 months over the cut-off for overseas players. But the Knights club has appealed. It says Boyd deserves special consideration because he was sacked.
We've since made another application to the league asking them to reconsider the matter. We believe that it is an exceptional circumstance, and that we've asked them to reconsider the matter before the ARL board meeting on Tuesday morning.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
The former Knights star was shining under the TV lights last night on NBN's League Extra, but it was on the paddock that he really made his mark as 5/8 and skipper. He's been away for a season with Halifax in England. Back in Oz, Hagan has some special work to do before going back overseas.
Well, at this stage, I've got a contract to go back to Halifax, and there's probably a good chance that we'll go back probably in the first or second week in August. And at the moment, I'm just waiting for my wife to deliver our third child.
Hagan's been a keen follower of the Winfield Cup, which gets good coverage in England. He believes the Knights are on a roll.
Their form in the last 4 or 5 weeks has been very good. Obviously a bit of a hiccup against Balmain, but they did everything but win that game in the last couple of minutes. And if they can continue in that vein, I'm sure they'll be there or thereabouts at the end of the season.
Newcastle's clash on the Gold Coast will be critical. The Knights must beat the cellar dwellers if they are to maintain their run towards the semi-finals. See the game on NBN on Sunday. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Under the new Local Government Act, Greater Taree City Council has to use the new 1992 valuations for rating purposes. While the total value of property in the council's area has increased 81% since the last valuations were done in 1986, there are wide-ranging variations in individual property cases, anywhere from no increase at all to more than 3 times.
Some people have had a fairly wild fluctuation in rating. They're obviously going to wear a higher dollar value as far as their rates are concerned, and equally quite a number will have a reduction in rating. But at the end of the day, council doesn't receive an additional dollar.
The effect will be to completely redistribute the rate burden across the whole of the city's area, with some parts of the community affected more than others.
Well, it appears to have affected mainly the village areas and the commercial areas perhaps in Wingham and the village areas where there is a commercial area. Those appear to be the ones that have been greatly affected.
Council's draft management proposal outlining the changes is on display at the Chambers for the next 4 weeks, and the public is invited to comment. The Council is due to formally set the rates for the next financial year at a special meeting before the end of next month.
The white fences of one of Scone's horse studs are the first sign of the town's close affinity with thoroughbreds. This relationship echoed by the excitement of thousands of people at the town's biggest race day, the Scone Cup. Going to the races in this town involves more than just having a bet, it's an experience. The petition members area is a walk through racing's rich past, patrons living it up in the same style as the original members surely did at the first meeting 47 years ago. But not far away, this quiet civility is broken by the passion called punting.
The serious action is in the betting ring, where punters are trying to consolidate on their winnings or get back their losses.
Beer replaces champagne, as the form guide is studied like a religious document. Everybody trying to back a little piece of history, the last winner of the Cup at Scone's old track. Cliffhanger entered the history books. Unfortunately for most punters, he'll be remembered as the one that got away, paying $47.10 and $8.10. The trifecta a massive $9,250.70. But there were no tears, no hint of sentiment over the loss of the old track. In racing, you only look to the future.
Wherever racing is, you'll remember things, and that's good. But I don't think anybody will be sorry to see them get to the new track.
The past is the past, the future is to come, and so I think we'll all enjoy the new one.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News. Aussie Rules Under Lights, a unique experience for fans and players in Newcastle. The $280,000 light system at the No. 1 Oval, drawing the crowd in like moths to a flame. But the novelty of the first night game was short-lived, as Newcastle City in the dark blue and Wests set out to settle some old scores. Ball handling was poor early, as both sides tried to get used to the new conditions. Wests led at the first break with the help of some long-range goals. But City started to control the ball and converted possession into points. The Blues side was 9 in front at half-time and had stretched the lead to more than 6 goals at three-quarter time. City kicked home its advantage to eventually double West's score, winning 17-18, 120 to 8-12, 60. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Nancy was a special guest at an Army Cadet parade in Port Macquarie this afternoon when she made the outburst.
Digger James thought he would get me for $50,000 and I had to pay $156,000. Well, bugger him.
The attack comes in the wake of the war heroine selling her medals at auction on Monday in Melbourne for $156,000. The winning bid was placed by Victorian RSL President Bruce Ruxton on behalf of the RSL. But Nancy revealed today that the national president of the RSL tried to buy her out for a much cheaper price.
Don't you think that was a dreadful thing for the head of the RSL to do that? Offer me a deal for $50,000? I think that is disgusting, and I hope I never see him for his sake, because if I ever meet him, I'll tell him exactly what to do with himself.
Mrs. Wake, known as the White Mouse, became famous for her involvement in rescuing more than 1,000 Allied soldiers from occupied France. Later this month, she will return to Europe to be part of celebrations to mark the 50th anniversary of D-Day. Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News.
The memorial rally is held each year to honour Greg Cossingham, a keen rally enthusiast who was killed in a truck crash. The overall winners this year were Lindsay Collitz from Port Macquarie and Glenn Bennett from Coffs Harbour in a Nissan Pulsar. Roberts and Avery were second in a Mazda RX-2. Competitors raced against the clock over a 227-kilometre course through Coopanook, Johns River and Middle Brother State Forest. Meanwhile, the first round of the New South Wales Junior Dirt Track title got underway at Kempsey Speedway this weekend. More than 150 riders from across the state took part. Entrants were from as young as 5 to 16.
Maitland came out breathing fire. They were taking no prisoners after an early Souths try. The Pumpkin Pickers were on the board with a neat pass to big forward Whitby. Souths hit back after a Maitland mistake and it gave them new heart, running in with some tough defence. The game was marred with scrappy play. At one stage it seemed the Pumpkin Pickers didn't want the ball. Not for long though, in a break in play, Maitland ran in some sensational tries. Lawler got his first off a great pass and then one of the plays of the game, a long kick from the 22, and Lawler showed he can play soccer as well. Down to the bell and it was tight, Maitland winning 26-22, putting them into fourth on the ladder. In other games, West gave Cessnock a hiding, the Butcher Boys were murdered by Toronto, and North Nelson Bay got up against Waratah. The flag was at half-mast outside the Adamstown RSL Club as a mark of respect for one of Newcastle's most revered soldiers.
It means, possibly to the family and to us, the end of an era.
At the age of 19, Tom Mowbray was in the trenches of Gallipoli. As a member of the 18th Battalion, he fought the Turks in a battle in which 9,000 Australians were killed. He later fought in France with the 5th Machine Gun Battalion. Tom was a founding member of the Adamstown RSL sub-branch, receiving an award for 50 years' service to the organisation. He was born and grew up in Adamstown, where a street bears the family name.
We'll never forget him. We miss him.
Tom died on Thursday evening at the Catalina Nursing Home at Rathmines, aged 97. Being the last surviving Anzac in this region, it's the end of a chapter in soldiering. Tom's funeral will be held tomorrow.
I would wonder whether the Uniting Church at Adamstown will hold all the mourners.
It's been a great year at the box office for the Hunter Orchestra, but even though audiences have more than doubled, the orchestra could fold.
If we have to cease operations, we'll have to sack 6 full-time employees and about 60 part-time professional musicians.
The orchestra is facing its biggest financial crisis since turning professional in 1989. It needs $150,000 to finish its 94 season.
It's an accumulated problem that has come from very poor funding from the federal and state governments. At the moment, only about 30% of our income comes from federal and state sources. We raise 70% of our income from within the region, 41% of that at box office.
At the orchestra's Newcastle headquarters, a concerted fundraising effort is underway. It includes a merchandising drive, a special Lord Mayoral letter drop asking for help, and a new appeal for government funds. It's money John Robson believes the Hunter deserves.
We're one of the most productive regions in Australia. We earn a very high proportion of the export income of Australia from this region. The money is not coming back here. We believe it should.
The picket line outside the distribution centre at Cardiff began at 10:30 this morning. Around 40 employees walked off the job over what they say is unfair treatment of a forklift driver.
Talks broke down this morning over one of our members being demoted from a forklift driver to a order picker. He had an accident. A forklift ran into a doorway and they decided to stand him down.
According to union spokesman Barry Sparks, the picket will last indefinitely until the man is reinstated. Woolworths management says an offer was made to refer the dispute to the Industrial Commission, but claims the men just walked out. A spokesman for Woolworths says the picket line at Cardiff will not affect any supplies to Woolworths supermarkets.
Hunter residents were among the many Australians who fought for their country during World War I. Now their contributions are to be recorded in a Great War exhibition at Newcastle Regional Museum. The permanent display, due to open later this year, is intended to go beyond the military aspect.
We also want to talk about the Hunter as it was during the war, the war support work that so many people did, the women who either did comfort funds or joined the nurses. And we want to talk about conscription.
The valuable post-war efforts of local soldiers will also be canvassed.
If you take the example of, then Major Corlett, Corlett Street, just around the corner here from the museum, he was a surveyor. He was tremendously important, as you'll see, in the action at the war. But when he came back, he actually started the Australian Ordnance Survey maps, which can now cover the whole country, and he started them here in Newcastle.
Especially built for the exhibition will be an assimilated trench complete with machine gun fire. Also featured in the exhibition will be one of the largest databases outside of Canberra, containing information of locals who served in the war. But to enable this to happen, the museum is appealing to the public to come forward with any wartime stories they may recall or memorabilia they may have. Following Sunday's 1-1 draw with English side Sheffield United in Tweed Heads, Australia's Olaroos will make an appearance in Newcastle this Friday night in a game against Greek junior side Aris. Breakers Promotions Officer Shane Johnson says it's an opportunity to see some of Australia's hottest young talent before they take up playing commitments overseas. One local player also with an opportunity to experience the code abroad is Breakers midfielder Robbie Middleby. The 19-year-old is currently considering an offer from Sheffield United to train with the club for 5 weeks next month. Catherine Lamont, NBN News.
Since it entered the arena 18 months ago, it's been a long and controversial development haul for Macloy's. The land at the centre of it all, around 160 hectares on Lake Macquarie's Greenpoint, purchased and earmarked by Macloy's for housing development. After buying the land, months of heated arguments with council ensued, at one stage the developer calling off all negotiations. But recently, Council's Greenpoint Task Force helped to reach a final agreement, which calls for Council to buy back the land for around $3 million, with Macloy's agreeing to a smaller residential development, some additional land at Elibana in exchange, as well as a financial settlement. Council's General Manager Robert Gray claims the deal has come at a substantial cost to Council. In a report being considered tonight, he states the need to rationalise open space within the city to establish clear priorities for acquisition, to look to new strategies to fund and maintain reserves which have the greatest potential benefit to the community. Lake Macquarie has around 3,200 hectares of open space parkland. While Mr Grant denied reports revenue from such sales would be used to foot the total Greenpoint bill, believed to be around $4 million, he did confirm Council needed to consider carefully how it would fund future parkland projects. Melinda Smith, NBN News.
Dr Palfrey was in Newcastle today, where she will host a public lecture tonight.
Basically, we're looking at the kinds of family and community problems that put children at risk for long-term difficulties in school and actually later on in their adolescence.
She believes children are influenced from the day they are born. If they live all their young years in a family racked by alcoholism or violence, then it will have an adverse effect on their personality.
The child is part of that family, and it's critical that the family be supporting the child and showing the love between the parents at all times and not fighting in front of the child, for instance.
Dr Palfrey will return to Sydney tomorrow before flying back to America at the end of this week.
3 people died when the semi-trailer Anthony James Grubb was driving slammed into the back of 4 vehicles stopped at roadworks on the New England Highway at Branxton last year.
It's horrific. There's only one word for it, it's horrific.
Anthony Grubb told police he hadn't seen any signs warning motorists to stop for roadworks. However, last month he pleaded guilty to culpable driving, and today he was sentenced to 9 months jail. For Jenny Apps, whose parents Beryl and Richard Apps were killed in one of the stationary vehicles, the sentence wasn't long enough. District Court Judge Gibson told the court Grubb had shown a remarkable lack of appreciation of other users of the highway. The judge said that this was one of the more serious cases that has come before him. However, in sentencing Anthony Grubb, he took into account a number of factors. Grubb had no previous criminal record. He was a well-regarded father of 6, and the judge believed he was truly sorry, a view shared by Mr. Grubb's wife. Even so, Kay Burge from Belmont says the accident, which also claimed the life of her husband Ross, should never have happened. Anthony Grubb will serve his sentence at a minimum security prison near his family at Wodonga in Victoria. Jane Anderson, NBN News. The inquiry was ordered by Health Minister Ron Phillips after 3 killers who had been admitted to Morisset Hospital left the grounds by taxi and caught a train to Sydney last month. Video cameras caught 2 of them walking around Darling Harbour. Hunter Area Health Service boss Dr Tim Smythe says the internal investigation found no need for changes to procedures or policies at Morisset Hospital.
Well, the inquiry found that the procedures we have in place for the assessment of these patients is quite adequate.
Morisset Hospital isn't ringed by a fence. However, Dr Smythe says security won't be tightened. Patients sent to Morisset by criminal courts will continue to be allowed unsupervised access to the hospital grounds, where the Health Review Tribunal sees fit.
It's a misconception and a beat up by the media that there has been any lapse in security at Morisset. Morisset is a hospital, it is not a prison. The only thing that I think will be different is taxi drivers will not necessarily be picking up people quite so easily.
The 3 men who left the Morisset campus and spent a night in Sydney are now in the psychiatric hospital at Long Bay Jail. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The alarm was raised last night after Mrs Matheson's sons could not find her at her Manning Point home just near Taree. The 78-year-old grandmother has not been seen for a week. This morning a rescue party was set up to search the grounds of her 150-hectare property. The searchers, including police, the SES and the Manning Valley Rescue Squad, worked under difficult conditions, trudging through swamps and marshlands. Police are still hopeful Mrs Matheson can be found.
There's obviously concern for her welfare having regard to her age and the inhospitable grounds here.
The search was suspended at sunset. It'll resume tomorrow at first light. The police chopper will be brought in to search from the air. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Six years and 7 months ago, George Slavinsky shot his wife Alice 4 times in front of his 17-year-old daughter Natasha at their Hawks Nest home north of Newcastle.
And I yelled out, "What's happening?" And Mum said, "He shot me." And I just started screaming and ran out.
Alice later died. George Levinsky pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 8 years jail. He was released in 1990, having served just 2.5 years of his sentence. 4 years later, a medical tribunal overturned the recommendations of the State Medical Board and allowed George to resume his career as a doctor, but only under supervision as a resident medical officer in a public hospital. The decision has devastated Alice's mother and sister, who live in the Newcastle suburb of Dudley. They say they're unable to understand how the man who shot their Alice is now being trusted to treat patients.
It's just no good. We didn't even like him getting out of jail, let alone being back in his own life again. That's all wrong.
The reinstatement is tragic timing for the family. Alice Levinsky would have celebrated her 51st birthday today.
George's life's going on as per normal. He's back in the medical profession, and all we have is a gravestone to go to and place flowers on. That's our day.
Mr. Slavinsky couldn't be contacted today. He'll be eligible to start a medical practice in 2 years. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.